Right. So imagine this scenario. You wake up in Philadelphia. Oh, so good. What a nice morning. Sun is shining outside your window. And suddenly you hear the call to prayer. Now, I'm just joking. That's a different situation in a different state. Instead, you look out the window and you see a red flag flying where you thought you would see the American flag. What flag did you see there, Tiffany, and why?
Well, so there's been a lot of controversy around this because, yes, City Hall in Philadelphia, the birthplace of America, right? Signing of the Declaration of Independence. The communist China's red flag is seen flying, just friendly, waving away.
Not good.
So basically, it's part of this whole thing that's supposed to be friendly to the Chinese Americans who live there. So it'd be like, oh, there's a lot of Chinese Americans, we welcome you, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of Italians, you fly the Italian flag, blah, blah, blah. But the reason this is causing so much controversy, obviously, there's a lot of tensions right now between the US and Communist China. And a lot of people are pointing out, wait, do we really want to fly the flag of an authoritarian regime that's has a long history of human rights abuses since its founding in what's seen as the birthplace of America? Like, do you really want those values clashing? So there's been, you have John Molinar, the chairman of the House Select Committee on the CCP. He's been very outspoken against this. You have state senators in the state of Philadelphia, Doug Mastriano. He's been speaking out against this. You have a lot of human rights groups, advocates speaking out against this. Actually, in Ottawa, in Canada, as a protest, they flew the Chinese flag upside down in front of the Chinese embassy over there to protest it. But there's a lot here because basically also October 1st is this week marks 76 years since the Chinese Communist Party cemented its power as the ruling party inside of China. So there's also that timing that some are raising and being, it's like, why would you do it now of all times? And then actually speaking of destabilizing, some are digging into the groups that are tied here. And so there's some sister city relations that some are pointing to that goes to China's Tianjin. And then some are looking at the associations that are involved. And then if you trace it back, it goes back to the United Front as well. So there's concerns there as well. So there's a whole hodgepodge of concerns, if you will.
Seems like the terrorists are revealing themselves.
The enemy within.
Yeah. Well, I feel like the frog has been boiled very slowly. Because you're right, it's like you see that across many places. For St. Patrick's Day, they'd fly the Irish flag. It's not a big deal. But just as an American, seeing us as a city government fly the communist flag, we should have flown the Qing flag of China. That would have been something with the yellow one with the dragon.
And I think a piece of it that nobody ever takes into account is how this is almost certainly getting played in China, right? That's the part that people here won't consider, but we know everything is a propaganda tool. And for sure, they'd be saying, look, Philadelphia, birthplace of American democracy. When you were talking about it, I was thinking of, when the Nazis marched into France and they were very sure to hang the flag on the L'Arc de Triomphe and the Eiffel Tower and on Versailles, where the horrible treaty was signed after World War I. Yeah. So it plays back home for sure.
All right, very good French pronunciation. So moving along, China's National Day. So you said that China's National Day was, obviously celebrated across China with declarations of how great their economy is. But apparently their economy is trash. Is that a quote here?
Well, so there's a buzz phrase, if you will, that's going around Chinese social media. They're saying it's the garbage time of history inside China right now, ahead of Golden Week, which is so basically to celebrate the CCP's founding. They have an 8-day holiday, or it's known as Golden Week. So there's no school, people travel around, la da da. So speaking to Christopher Balding, he used to teach at Peking University's HSBC School of Business until 2018 when he was fired for speaking out against censorship. So anyways, he was in Shenzhen, and he's like, every year it's a huge deal because Shenzhen is one of the biggest tech cities in China. So very almost like our Silicon Valley, not quite the same level, but very busy, lots of, high-end jobs, la da da. But every year when Golden Week comes, it empties out because no one actually lives there. They're just working there. So everyone travels across the country. So you have, ahead of this year's Golden Week, you had some China, numbers coming out. No one can really prove where these numbers came from, but they're predicting that there's going to be 2.4 billion journeys inside of China. So all of that traveling, whether that's by plane, car, whatever, train, is going to boost the consumer economy inside China. But I was asking Christopher Balding his thoughts on that, and he was like, well, maybe they're traveling because you want to see family and stuff, but he expects you're going to see this trend, if you will, where a lot of the people traveling are bringing like instant noodles with them. So they're bringing their own food and maybe staying with family. They're not going to be spending money at the hotels or at the local restaurants and like boosting that consumer economy on that level. So yeah, speaking about the economy, we've seen, communist China since the pandemic really try to do a couple different measures to try and get foreign investment back in. Whether or not that's successful doesn't look like it's been, because Global Finance is digging into these numbers by Beijing State Administration of Foreign Exchange. It's called SAFE. So they report inbound investment from foreign sources. So it found that in 2024, China saw a 30-year drop in terms of foreign direct investment, which is known as FDI, into China. So basically, all foreign-bound money that entered China in 2023 was $33 billion. Mm-hmm. That's a staggering 90% drop from 2021.
Oh, we have a graph of that foreign inflows into China.
And that's the lowest level since 1993.
Mm-hmm. Oh, hey. So this section, I was going to call it the return to the 90s. Okay. So China's economy is really returning to the 90s. Very good. Back to tradition. Okay.
Well, we'll see if...
Well, the one thing about that graph I'm not sure is whether that's inflation-adjusted dollars. If not, it looks worse than it is, but it's still obviously a huge, like 90% drop still, yeah.
We'll have to bring in our finance experts. But if you want to ask like analysts why you're seeing a decline in foreign direct investment, some of it is like, you never saw the post-pandemic rebound that, if you look at the U.S. market, we're doing pretty well compared to. It's actually kind of funny. Christopher Balding's like, 30 billion isn't a small number, but like in terms of China's economy, that's like a rounding error. Like that's how big of a difference that 30 billion into the economy means compared to the past.
That, and also I feel like these FDI numbers, the federal dollars coming, the outside foreign dollars coming in, they are probably the best real measure of China's economy, because all the other numbers are cooked. Right, like their GDP numbers, their unemployment numbers, like you can't really trust those numbers. But the foreign investment because that's reported before it goes into the country, that's actually a really like strong indicator of the reality.
Well, and on that point too, in China, if you question the economic numbers, it's illegal. Mm-hmm. You can actually get imprisoned for it. Even if you work in finance and if you publicly post about the actual state of the economy, you can get criminally charged for it. But I know the CCP actually found a way to restore happiness to the population, because they made it illegal to be unhappy on the internet. That's a new law. They actually made it illegal to be pessimistic. So
sarcasm reigns.
It's one way to make everyone happy. You make it illegal to be sad.
Obviously.
Yeah, you have like rules like that inside China, and then if you are a foreign company trying to operate inside China, it's becoming increasingly hard. Because it's a very unpredictable business environment. They've been enforcing their own what they call like counterintelligence laws, and then they basically expanded. So it used to be anything that was deemed a national security threat to the country. Now it's anything deemed of national interest to China. So if your company as a foreign company makes more money than a Chinese one, for example, I interviewed people who that happened to them and they were deemed a threat, ended up in jail, and eventually made it back out to America. And then you also had this like trend that you've been seeing across past couple years where they're doing these. Basically, they just show up, like the police or investors will just show up to foreign-based consultancies that are inside China. So you had like the Mintz Group and Bain. So they would be, trying to figure out the auditing process, or like, how the businesses in China are operating and how they're doing, and provide those reports for businessmen to figure out if this is a good investment. Suddenly their offices were raided. So you have those stories. And then we were reporting earlier this year, right, the Wells Fargo banker, who is an American, who was just going to China to visit family. She was arbitrarily detained. She actually was just, the latest post I could find from that was the Washington Post in mid-September, that the U.S. won the case to get her back out. But you have stories of that where Americans are being arbitrarily detained, or you have exit bans. You also have a lot with foreigners who are not suddenly allowed to leave the country. So you have all of those things. And then you have the bigger geopolitical tensions, right? Where you have, again, the US and China right now, a lot of trade tensions, the tariffs, la da da. So you have all of those factors where a lot of companies are like, is it really worth investing in China? And of course, at this point, you have a lot of companies that did do a lot of business in China, and then they come out and they have all of these stories where, like, to get into the China market, you have to have a joint venture with a Chinese company. And then what happens is oftentimes the Chinese company then steals all your know-how, your intellectual property, creates their own company, and then outcompetes you on the international stage. I've spoken to many people who had that happen or know people who had that happen to them. So you have those stories coming out, and now it's just like, as an environment for businesses, it's like, yeah, there's always risk, right? But now a lot are like, is it actually getting too risky? But at the same time, you do have some who are like, I'm gonna double down, China's still that golden goose. So, you know, it's a mixed bag.
Yeah, I wonder if that foreign investment is shifting from like Western nations to more like BRICS nations. That would be an interesting breakdown to look at, right? Because they're obviously in there like forging new alliances with different countries. Because it's obviously lower, but then those countries, they would have lower demand too. So I would be interested to see that as a follow-up.
The combination of the tariffs, the international tariffs, and the combination of Trump bringing back U.S. manufacturing is offsetting a lot of that.
Well, that's President Trump's hope and push, right, to bring all of that money back.
But you're also watching a lot go to the Middle East. They're doing a lot now too.
All right, so speaking of bringing China back to the 90s, I found this clip I wanted to share with you because this guy brings up a very interesting point I hadn't thought of before. Let me play the clip and then we can discuss.
China is smaller than you think. I am thoroughly convinced that they are lying about their population. And I can prove it with math. Because currently China's official population is 1.4 billion people. But if we look back in history, this number doesn't really make sense. Because back in 1980, when the one-child policy was first introduced, China had an official population of 981 million people. And the one-child policy would have on paper at least led China to have a fertility rate of about 1, meaning 1 child born per every woman. With that in mind, China's population should have shrunk by roughly 2.5% every year, which means 35 years later in 2015, when the one-child policy was finally reversed, that China should have had a population of roughly 408 million people, with an overall net decline of about 58% of its population. However, in 2015, they reportedly had a population of 1.38 billion people. Now, I understand that not everyone was strictly following the one-child policy, but even with that, the country was at best not even hitting replacement fertility rates. So how did they grow by 39% population when they should have shrunk by 58%? And the answer is they are lying about their population numbers. And one reason as to why could be local governments, because a lot of them receive funding based on how many people they have in their specific province or city. So in a roundabout way, they would be encouraged to lie about their population to get a budget surplus. Either way, mathematically, there's no possibility that China even has 1 billion people in it. The numbers just don't add up.
Where do you find these people?
Compelling. That's all I'll say. Compelling. Any opinions on that argument?
Well, so you do have Scientific American that put out a piece saying that China's population could be cut in half by, how would you say that, like 2100, the year 2100? And so they were looking at basically the latest United Nations report was also already indicating that the population is declining. And then in 2023, India, surpassed China to become the most populous country. And then many have been pointing at, China's fertility rate they were talking about there, dwindling population, demographic crisis, and then all these different factors, because it's like you've been seeing all those trends where it's like you don't have enough young people to be able to provide a good environment for the older populations, kind of laid out in the one-child policy thing that he was talking about there. And then you have all these incentives that the Chinese regime's trying to do, right, where they're like, you need to have 3 kids now, you need to do this, you have to go get married. And then as a result, people are like, no, but, the economy's not doing well. You have recent grads, especially, like students graduating, they're like, where are the jobs that were promised to me?
I think their population is 400 million, like that guy said. That's my suspicion. Look, it's true. I've read books that detail, like, even in the rural counties, because you know how the CCP, like, really digs deep into the society. So the one-child policy, of course, I personally know people who are like, they had a kid and then they gave it to somebody else, and then they were raised as cousins, but they're really brothers. Like those cases, I'm sure abound. But it would be less than replacement, right? But instead, it was like 2.5% growth year over year, right? Instead of a 2.5% decline.
It'd be interesting if it was
Compelling.
always the exact, equal growth.
Right, but I guess
because that also shows it's.
But it's an incentive structure across
That's
the country,
true.
so it's not. It wouldn't necessarily be that everyone would do it differently.
That's
I don't know. That guy would made a compelling argument that I'm buying into. Very hard to count people, and even in the U.S., like. In our open society, when you have those job numbers come out and they're overestimated, and then, at least we have someone that goes back later and says, actually, they're like 800% or whatever. What was the last one? Like, how many percent? 80% overestimated?
But there was like 1 million
Right.
jobs.
So you live in a communist country where the incentives are backwards. I don't know, 400 million people maybe?
I think that's quite a jump.
Okay, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
Not 1.38. Don't believe it. Okay, moving along. Any final thoughts? Return to 90s?
Something to look forward to at the end of this month. President Trump is expected to meet face-to-face with Xi Jinping on the sidelines of an APEC summit in South Korea. So that's something to watch out for if, everyone's waiting for this trade deal.
All right. Look out for that. If you're thinking, oh, maybe will you guys be over at APEC to report on it? No, because they actually denied our press credentials again. They said sorry, but they gave us a very weak, worded answer. Sorry, circumstances don't allow us to give you press credentials. I wonder what that could mean. What circumstances?
AKA Xi Jinping does not like you.
Exactly. By the way, ASEAN, if you don't know, what does it stand for?
Well, this one is APEC, so the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum.
Right. So there you go.
Or ASEAN would be Association of Southeast Asian Nations.
All right, I know exactly what you're thinking. That was a great clip you just watched. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to follow and also check out either these videos or maybe they're on this side. I don't know which side they're on, but we set it up. So these are the videos that YouTube is suggesting to you as the best ones that you'll probably like the most. So check them out, this side,